approve?
Yep.
Okay. Well, we will get started then and kind of go through our agenda in terms of kind of some of the topic areas that we want to focus on in the conversation here this evening. And we will go through a little bit of just that planning process recap. It's always nice to sort of refresh a little bit, like what are the kind of the steps that we're going through, and then we'll spend a kind of a chunk of our time going through some of the input summary that we've heard, both through the public meeting that we facilitated a few weeks ago, as well as the online survey that we closed not too long ago. So we can kind of begin to kind of get a capture of some of the trends and thoughts that we've been, kind of hearing from the community. And then we have a draft of some of them based on that, right? Based on kind of some of those ideas or concepts. We have a draft vision statement and goals and some objectives to kind of work through with our various planning elements. So we'll have a discussion on each and every one of those individually. So again, real quickly, the Indiana kind of code requirements in terms of what's in a comprehensive plan, just so we're familiar with kind of, again, what it is that we're trying to craft and put together. The code requires a statement of goals and objective and that vision statement, so that's why you'll see we're going to talk about that here this evening. Then it outlines a couple of other items that they want you to cover. So that includes land use, kind of the transportation utility issues. So that's kind of those statements and the kind of the direction in terms of a policy of those is kind of the fundamental baseline of what a comprehensive plan for a community needs. Then it outlines, and in terms of some suggestions of some other areas that you may, as a community, want to cover or highlight. However, since your process is going through OCRA, the Office of Community and Rural Affairs, which is funding your effort, they kind of really take that and define that better for you. So they go through and then identify 13 other plan element areas, and it does cover the ones that are the fundamental ones in code. So there's really sort of 10, if you will, additional plan areas that we have to address. And so tonight there'll be a few kind of things maybe that I don't know really what we're thinking about. There's not a huge issue in the community related to, say, maybe hazard mitigation, the last one that's on the bullet list there. However, because your funding through OCRA requires that we address that, we have to acknowledge it in some form or fashion. So you'll see that we have some discussion items for each and every one of those, and that's the reason why, is because your OCRA kind of grant requires that we cover each one of those. So again, we're looking at planning in terms of kind of articulating kind of where we are today, and we've been doing that through our documentation of those existing conditions, both in terms of the kind of the on the boots on the ground kind of things, in terms of existing land use and transportation and what have you. We talked a little bit about some of those demographics and community profile trends at I believe our last kind of steering committee meeting, where we walked through some of those demographics and kind of trends, and so you can kind of begin to see, like, well, here's sort of directions of population growth or income or what have you. And then we've been spending some time kind of trying to better understand where we want to go. So again, that community involvement, and then we'll be getting to address, well, how do we get there? So we need to kind of figure out, based on all of this, here's kind of where we want to go, because sometimes maybe that's a little bit different of a trajectory than if we would take some of those demographic trends, right? Maybe there's a certain line that's drawing, but based on what we're hearing, we want to do something different. Well, how do you make up that difference, or how do you sort of change that trajectory? And so that will all be covered in kind of the next phase of that implementation discussion. Once again, we really see kind of the comprehensive plan as sort of being these layers of elements. You can kind of really see that with the way that OCRA does it, with those variety of community planning elements, right? So, kind of think what makes a healthy and vibrant community, right? It's everything from land use and transportation and infrastructure, those nuts and bolts of kind of what makes a community function, but it's also those quality of place kind of things. So you think of placemaking or community programming or other initiatives related to maybe health and wellness or activities. And so those are all items that hopefully we addressed in terms of some form or fashion with the discussion elements here this evening. We do again reinforce that the comprehensive plan is that legislative document that the elected officials, maybe developers or what have you, can use in terms of understanding the articulation of a direction for a community that they wish to take. We also articulate again that a comprehensive plan is not zoning, right? So this is not, when we talk about, and I bring that up this evening because we will talk about kind of the future land use, because again, that's one of the elements we have to cover. So you have to give some policy direction to that. But just because we're talking about maybe some desires for land use does not in any form or fashion affect whatever the current zoning is. If there is something maybe that is different in terms of a land use discussion, say, we have this kind of land use, we'd really like it to be this type of land use, a policy or tool to implement that would be a zoning change or update, but that would be an action item that would be completely separate and stand alone from the comprehensive plan. So it's a totally separate kind of thing, although maybe an implementation item related to it. This does not change or in any way adjust any kind of rezoning or zoning update whatsoever. So again, we always highlight that, particularly when we again are going to be launching into some land use discussions, that there is a separation. So tonight again, we're kind of our deliverables. We're going to be talking about in red there those vision goals, objective, and those plan elements, and we're kind of that midway point in terms of kind of some of our planning process. After this evening, we will revise and update some of the comments in terms of the various draft elements, and then again, that will all be presented back out to the public again in a similar forum like we had with the earlier visioning open house held a few weeks ago. So after the first of the year, sometime probably in late January or what have you, is what we're targeting for that. So with that, I guess any questions in terms of, again, just kind of the baseline and just, again, kind of what we're doing and kind of what we're looking at? Yeah, yeah.
Nope.
Good.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I do have a question, but maybe David could address it better. If the town of Dayton wants to rezone land that the town of Dayton does not own, does the landowner have to agree, or is there a process? I remember back in, 1997, whenever the last land use plan that the county did, was some of our land was rezoned, but we didn't argue with it. They changed it from ag to R1, which made our property taxes increase. But we were young and foolish at that time and didn't, try to argue, but it was changed.
Well, they rezoned a couple acres over here that was, I think it was GB or ND south of the tracks, because John Swift came to us and they wanted to rezone it back to R1. The old board wanted a gas station or a fire station or a gas station south of the tracks. A couple boards ago didn't want any of that, so we let them rezone it from neighborhood business or GB to R1, which devalued our land, but we had to give them permission. They couldn't do it.
So that's the process.
Actually, when you do a new town plan, neighborhood plan, comprehensive plan, and after it's adopted, there can be rezoning associated with it. We just finished a plan for Stockton, which is Stockwell, an unincorporated town, and they were doing a number of sort of corrective rezonings. They have a bunch of property that's on R3 for multifamily that they want rezoned back to R1, which is what it really should be. So we're going to sponsor those rezonings on their behalf. Some of the other land use changes, like residential growth around the old part of town, we're not going to do any proactive rezonings because they're leery of that. So we're kind of doing the low-hanging fruit rezoning they wanted, and we're doing it. We did get permission from the property owners, but I think state code allows for a rezoning as long as you have 51% of the ownership stake. Not opposing is the language.
The thing is, they'll still have, the property owner will still have the ability to then go to those hearings and contend it if they don't agree to it. But when it comes to putting the request form through.
So does the property owner have to agree to it?
Doesn't have to.
Okay.
That's a good question.
That answers.
But will it go through if the property owner doesn't? If they go,
It's really rare if the property owner shows up and says, I don't want this done, and the area plan commission and the commissioners would say yes. But the rezoning comes back through your council.
Right.
You're the legislative body, so it could get kiboshed there.
Okay.
But that's a good question, and you should keep in mind if you do want to do any of these potential rezonings that may come up.
Okay,
You could sponsor them, or we could sponsor them.
okay.
And the future land use plan is, since it's not a legal thing, it's
Yeah.
more like a support
Mhm.
recommendation for it. So
This is
like
why.
say, yeah, so say if there is an outside, rezoning that may go against what the initial future land use says, like we want, like Dayton wants residential here, but then it's getting, put to rezone to say like a commercial or industrial thing. You can use the future land use, like that will be brought into the discussion
Your
of
support
the,
Yeah.
of why the decision
of,
should be
of
based on.
why it shouldn't or shouldn't be. Like the town has a vision for this area. Here's the future land use to support
Yeah.
that
And,
instead of just.
and you think about that in theory, right? Like as elected officials maybe come and go, that's another way in terms of like, okay, I understand like what we're,
Mhm.
what you're trying to sort of do and how you would still want to use that.
Right.
Because a lot of the plan elements, like we said, they build upon each other. So when it comes to like infrastructure improvements, may need to be in place for then future development.
Mhm.
But for the first 5 years, you only get so far into the utility and everything. But you want to still make sure that the other steps are in place and kind of correlate for future.
So all your work is not for nothing.
Yeah, and that's and also it's like think of it like a documentation of multiple kind of layers instead of separate plans
Yeah.
that don't talk to each other.
Right.
Trouble is in this area, not to be negative, but everything's tentatively, our outlying regions have got to be supported by our county commissioners, the three of them, and they absolutely are against all our wishes so far on everything we want to do. And that makes it hard. Even planning this and you go there, they got a lot of power down
The
there.
area I was thinking
So-
of was in town limits, so.
So there's a couple things there, and when we get to the future land
Yeah.
use thing, I think we can
Okay.
circle back on some of that. I think certainly, sort of again, when we think about future land use, and let's separate zoning from future land use, just so we can kind of mentally sort of like do that, understanding that, okay, maybe that's a policy of something that needs to be changed in order to achieve the future land use that you're wanting. And that's both within as well as perhaps surrounding. So if there are some future growth areas that may be worthy of discussion, I don't know if that's appropriate or not, and that's something that we have on the kind of the conversation here today. One of the things that Tippecanoe County is waiting on is your process here to end, and they're going to, in essence, include that into their overall process, right? So if you don't, in essence, give some ideas of like what you kind of want around,
Yeah.
then they'll just color it in. I'm being
Yeah.
simplistic, but they'll color it for you.
Yeah.
If you want to provide some suggestions, then that would be, this is the time to sort of provide those suggestions, if that makes,
Yeah.
in its most simplistic form, it makes
Mhm.
sense. Okay, well, let's go through a little bit in terms of some of the input, because this maybe helps a little bit in terms of framing like all of kind of the ideas or suggestions in terms of the draft elements that we've come up with or addressed.
Yeah, so firstly, we had our public meeting that was at the church and everything, and some of the big ideas, we said sky's the limit. We're not talking about budgets, we're not talking about fiscal years and sort of resourcing, like what do you want to see in Dayton? And a lot of things focused on like programming and parks and rec. People wanted things to do. They wanted to eat somewhere. They wanted to go to a park. They wanted to be able to walk somewhere. And they wanted to really just be able to satisfy their needs within Dayton instead of having to go out into the county or over to Lafayette area. One of the kind of land use mapping, where do you want to see residential areas, where you want to see like other kind of commercial areas. They wanted, based off of their needs and everything, they wanted more parks. An area was focused on in, quote, this downtown-esque area that's kind of central point, instead of, having to go over to the Subaru Park, the SIA Center and everything. But also having just, different kind of uses within the interchange. We had some conflicting opinions on what to put over in that area. Some people wanted industrial, as you know, some people wanted the commercial. So that's kind of leads into our land use discussion we're going to have. The connectivity as well. They wanted a complete kind of sidewalk. You have a great sidewalk start now, but there's a couple gaps that people wanted to fill in, as well as the contention of Yost Drive, do or not. We heard about 50-50, both sides from it at the meeting. Then top challenges, again, retail and dining. People wanted to be able to stay here, but they understood that, where are those places going to be? Are you going to build a brand new place? Is it going to be in some of like a vacant building? They understood that, we want this here, we just don't know where it's going to go, per se. And then also, like, what kind of quality of life improvements do you want to see in Dayton, to have you stay here and have, your family stay here as well, instead of, going off to college and then not returning to Dayton. Again, access to sidewalks, so that connectivity, being able to just move around, not really have a car, or like being able to bike to connect to the greater connections over in Lafayette, be able to do, one person said she wanted to be able to do a 20-mile loop and everything, but she can't really do that because she has to, drive 5 miles before she can connect back up into Lafayette. And I'm like, I ride on the roads all the time, and I understand that, like, that's scary to do and everything. But being able to have that more like recreational opportunity of even just like walking places, as well as just a visual improvement. Like, I've arrived at Dayton, I'm in Dayton, and like, I'm not just a little suburb of Lafayette. I know I'm in a town. Building off of your winter kind of banners and things like that throughout the whole entire year, so for a fact something's going on, or there's like activity and vibrancy within not just this little downtown area, but throughout the whole entire community. So I was at the public meeting. We heard very similar things for the online survey that we launched directly afterwards. It was the same questions, just online version of it. Firstly, we wanted some demographics. Who are we talking to? A large majority came from Dayton residents, so that's always good. We did have a couple people in the Tippecanoe County, so that could be Lafayette, or it could just be your rural residents as well. No one outside the area, though, so you got local opinions. Also, your age range was in the more adult, don't really have college students, which kind of mirrors what we saw in the demographics from our first meeting. I don't really have a lot of college kids living here, potentially going to like the Ivy Tech or Purdue over in Lafayette. But where do they work as well? They work not in Dayton, which once again we saw mirrors the demographics and everything. So we do have local people answering these questions. Again, we asked what some of the biggest assets and opportunities that could happen in Dayton, and they really loved the small town charm. And that was overarching everything. If we do development, we want small development. If we do improvements, we don't want, your super compact, I can elbow my neighbor kind of thing. I still like my larger lots, like my lawn. But they understand that, some growth can happen. It's just defining what type of improvements we want, as well as the interchange and the state road. That's great, opportunities for visitors to come that you can build off of, and the proximity to the school system of Lafayette, and having that be one of the biggest strengths, that people did a family here or settled here because they knew they had a strong school system that they could lead into. And some of also the opportunities, they understand the growth. It's more just defining what that growth looks like, instead of, I don't want the small subdivision kind of thing. Okay, and then some of the challenges, we gave kind of a spread of what kind of challenges people think that Dayton could be facing. Biggest thing, again, that we heard also from the public meeting was the limited dining and retail. That was at 67% of it, as well as community vision. Who is Dayton? Where is Dayton going? What's kind of like, what's your character other than it's a small town?
Even this will be you could pick more than one. So
Yes, yeah,
It's
it
not
was-
like you can't add it up to be a
Right,
hundred.
yeah.
So
it was
forget.
it was
Choose
pick
three,
choose
something.
your top three challenges. And then another big challenge was resistance to change at 52%. So that's, we want change, we don't know where it's going, so kind of fear of the unknown, but that things that could just be more defining of it instead of just a straight no. Then we asked, overall, what's your opinion of the overall quality of life? And just under 60% said that it was good. We didn't really have that many poor or very poor. So people are happy living here, and they think their needs are being met, or at least close proximity to their needs being met, which is a very, very good thing.
I'm curious, what does that look like for other small towns, similar sized towns that you do?
More of like the middle ground of
Okay.
like, I live here, so obviously I'm happy because I chose to live here.
Mhm.
But when it comes to like overall, is your quality of life met? So that includes like your work life as well as your home life, and your hobbies and everything like that. Do you have access
I mean,
to those
I'm
things?
sorry, what do
Yeah.
the answers look like usually for your typical small town?
Typically, small towns tend to be like satisfactory or like poor.
So this is better than average,
Yeah.
that,
I
okay.
would say sometimes, again, because sometimes if there's not a quality investment, say, in terms of, say, infrastructure, like if, again, like roads are falling apart and I have no whatever, then like that's a challenge for people, what have you. So
But like I
sometimes
don't
that
have
plays-
sewer utility, so
Right,
I'm on a
those kind of
septic,
things
so
play into it, and sometimes for a rural community, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
And so then that would tend to then, maybe be rated a little bit like lower, or draw the rating a little bit lower.
So the fact that you guys have multiple exceptionals and a majority good is what we're taking as a positive mindset.
Now, the reverse of some things that we're hearing, and kind of that 50-50 split in terms of growth, or I want the small town and we don't want to do anything. Sometimes the openness for growth is a little bit stronger.
Sure.
Because it's good how it is, so.
Well,
So what it's not broke, why change it
Mhm.
kind of thing. I'm happy how things are,
Right.
but for community to like, even if your community isn't growing, there's still things that can enhance it.
Yeah.
And still do improvements that make your existing stuff better. So then the next thing, going back to the whole quality of life. So if we are enhancing it, we just gave them a list, like what are the aspects, like how important are these things to your quality of life versus not important. And to just highlight some of the things that are very important, again, is that strong school system with 57%. Having reliable infrastructure is very important, and the beautification, kind of character, visioning aspect of it at also 45%. So those are the top things that directly impact their quality of life and what they conceive as their quality of life.
interesting on the not important, the two that stand out, and one I think is probably easy in terms of the access to job, the 37, that's maybe, not important. I think it's in reference, I interpret maybe that response is in reference to the idea of like, I'm working in Dayton. So I think the idea is like, I'm understanding like, I'm living here, raising a family here perhaps, but I understand
I'll
I'm
just go somewhere else.
correct.
To go
Yeah.
across
Because
the
that's a
interstate.
little bit of a higher number than sometimes you would see for a community, like little employment tends to be, something that's right, that's important, right? It's a little bit less important here, but I think it's because it's interpreted as I'm not going to be working here.
Yeah.
The other one, of course, is the access to higher education. That's
Right.
extremely high here. Like it's not important.
I've already
Um,
gotten my education. I
or
don't need
it's-
to go back.
Or there's like enough access already.
To have, yes, that's what
Yeah,
I was
I
saying.
think
It's already
Yeah.
established and
Yeah.
everything.
Yes.
We don't need to do more
Yeah.
to it.
It's available or what have you. But
Yeah.
it's not something in terms of that's an important sort of driver, if you will. So both of those are kind of outliers on the kind of the flip side of kind of the what's kind of highlighted as like kind of a desire or a priority. What's maybe not a priority.
We're lucky we got Lafayette touching us, and Stockwell and Clarksville, they gotta drive miles to get to those services.
Exactly,
People
and that's
here, yeah.
and that's a lot of things that people like. They don't necessarily need in Dayton because they can just drive
Right.
over. However, that's you know,
Except things like restaurants,
Yes.
they don't want to drive over.
Yeah.
yeah, I
They want
don't,
more here.
yeah, I don't want to drive 20 minutes and then sit at a restaurant for 30 minutes and then get a table and then,
Yeah.
you know, my dinner is now a 2.5, 3 hour event when I can just drive 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And shorten that and everything. Again, so then we looked at quality of life focused on recreational. What kind of improvements would kind of enhance that aspect of quality of life? To point out just new parks in general, 64% of it. New trails as well. They could be multi-use or they could just be walking paths, kind of larger than sidewalks, visioning it. Not necessarily greenways or anything like that, but just, you know, I can bike but not have to be worried about I'm going to elbow a person just walking. And then specifically, dog parks and splash pads, you know, kind of engaging different aspects near more so non-traditional park space. It doesn't have to necessarily be a giant water park, but that's a trend that we've seen in a lot of smaller communities that used to have a pool but no longer could have that investment, but they still wanted some sort of like summer activity. Splash pads come in very large sizes and very small sizes.
And there are no splash pads in this county.
No.
You have to go far away.
So you can see where this is going, right? Like when we start talking about kind of some of the ideas, you're going to be able to see like, okay, I can kind of see why you've pulled something over because recreation on the big topic rated high, and then when you start drilling down into that, well, what about, what areas of recreation are important? Clearly, the facility on the west side of the interstate is not
In their
both-
mind,
it's not connected, it's not part of
Because we can go
Dayton.
there.
You can, correct, right?
But it's
We
a very-
cannot.
Oh, you cannot.
We cannot.
Okay.
Oh, I thought it was available for the community's use.
I mean, I know of. I've never known it
SIA,
was.
Yes.
yeah.
I don't think so. I think it's just for
Employees.
employees and their families.
Okay, I thought it was. I thought it
I
was
thought it was
That would be
available
very
for you.
interesting to me. if it
because
was,
it's interesting because it is in the community. Of course, the rest of the plant is not in the community.
Uh-huh.
So the recreation facility is in the community, and I assumed, and then that was because that was the trade-off of, you know, this was the community could use it on occasion or what
We
have
have
you.
land right over there next to it on that side of the interstate. So.
Yeah, so people very much do not like associate with that whatsoever.
I've never associated that with like,
Yeah.
want to go up there to their
Because you can
farm?
kind of see again, like some of those activities of things could be or could be over there, but they're not.
That's
I don't
connection.
think we can get in there. I mean, unless you work there.
Okay, well that's good to
Okay.
know. Yeah.
The dog park thing does not surprise me though. I distinctly remember when we moved to Dayton and we would like walk around and I'm like, is it a rule that you have to own 2 dogs? Like everybody have dogs. Everybody in this town has dogs.
Yeah, and it's also known as having a safe area to have a dog off a leash. Was one of the things that I heard at the public meeting, as well as people's comments that they just want their dog to be able to be off leash but still contained and safe and things like that,
That's
and be
great.
able to, you know, play with other dogs. Dog parks can literally just be a fenced-in area, or it could have, you know, active playthings and things like that. Also something that could be very costly and also just very simple is the cost of the fence.
Yeah.
And then there's a sign that says dog park with a trash can.
Right.
Trash can for the little baggies. Looking at health and wellness as well, you know, how can Dayton support health and wellness things? People were connecting that back also to recreational programs and opportunities. You know, I myself know how to be healthy. I just don't have the facilities to be able to do that, except for going out to a gym and things like that. So being able to be more self-sufficient. Still having the support of different programming, kind of educational programs, but some people said that, you know, they have those things in Lafayette, so why do I need to, you know, compete with those existing programs, like YMCA after-school things, as well as their health educational programs and everything like that. So it was more so, I want to be able to do things here. I don't want to have to go to West Lafayette. So often. I keep saying West Lafayette because that's where my parents live. Keep forgetting it's 2 different cities. Looking at, so that's more of just positive, what can we do, and everything. Now we're going to look at what the survey said were some of the challenges. Initially, there weren't that many. People were always like, you know, we have a strong school system, we have those kind of in place. But there were still some, affordability of preschools as well as, just like access to non-college things, so trades. You could do different apprenticeship, blue collar things. But again, proximity to Lafayette schools, it's already established. There could be some minor improvements, but that's.
I think one thing this again is a little bit skewed. You're talking about kind of compared to others, clearly in terms of the access education and programs. I guess the one thing that I would throw out as a caveat in terms of the elementary school is in kind of any kind of future school consolidation. A lot of rural communities are threatened with the loss of their school.
Mm-hmm.
And not having rooftops or new rooftops to help support that enrollment is sometimes a challenge for those areas or those types of communities. And so that's something that did not really come up here. I did not hear that in terms of kind of the a driving underlying concern in terms of maybe a consolidation would eliminate sort of the school facility itself because it would be consolidated elsewhere. But that's it's kind of something to keep in mind because clearly oftentimes that's a kind of a rallying point or a backbone of kind of an institution right within a community, and if that were to disappear, then that vacuum or that hole is very difficult to sort of like, well, what do you how do you fill that, what do you do with that?
I think people don't worry about that so much now that because we started this Malacus in the first phase of the building out here, and he's got the options on another 198 acres, so therefore that's a total of 540, 550 houses.
The rooftops I'm talking
The
about.
rooftops would double the size
Yeah.
of town, so we
Yeah.
know that
Is an
it's,
option.
it's all coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just some of us want to spread them out a little more, but we all want the housing, we all want the building, we all want the new people.
Yeah, so that's
It's
again
not
something
the
like a concern that I hear and that we didn't hear this time, and that would, I think that's
So
probably
we
a fair
should be pretty safe.
why
in
that is the case. Yeah,
Well, I think also the school has plenty of enrollment.
Yes.
And TSC, adjusts its area that comes to Dayton according to,
What they're publishing.
what it needs. So it's not like Dayton has to provide the enrollment
correct.
for the school. We don't.
Yeah, but if that were to ever change,
Yeah.
that-
Right.
that's I guess what I threat that we didn't hear, and sometimes again in rural communities we do hear that as a distinct.
Yeah,
Correct.
normally we hear
Yeah.
our
Dry up.
enrollment is
Correct.
dropping.
Correct.
People are
Yeah.
instead going to
Oops.
they're adding a 10-minute drive instead of
Yeah.
utilizing like public like buses, like the school buses and everything like that to go to somewhere else. We didn't hear any of that.
Yeah.
So
Earl Park and Fowler, I remember because my relatives are up there, and the school dries up, and boy, it just devastates
That's what I'm saying.
the
Right,
town
exactly.
and everything.
Right. Yeah.
So.
yeah, and then so one of the last things that we did on the survey, instead of having our future land use map, we just asked like different categories, rough categories of what does Dayton need more of. Very similarly, more retail and dining, 73%, but also again the parks and rec, both physical facilities and programs and things like that. So it kind of big ideas as well as what we're needing, and as well as what's going to enhance my quality of life, what's going to keep me here is a lot of the retail dining and parks and rec and things to do in Dayton. And then lastly, we kind of just wanted to ask, some blanket statements, true or false. And I'm just like feeling out and everything. So Dayton should embrace growth. Agree, disagree.
That's a strong agree.
Yeah, it's a strong agree. Really, that to me was surprising from the public meeting. We had, if we would do that at the public meeting, I think it would have been 50-50. So that's a good thing, as well as should they support new development? A little bit lower, but still overall, yes. Should Dayton kind of prioritize redevelopment? So, building's already there, we want to do something else, or this kind of area is already existing, but we want to change it a little bit. Again, that was closer to the 50-50 side. Maybe I like things the way they are, that are pre-existing, and then improving the appearance of the built environments, like what kind of physically image of Dayton. People are like, yes, improve your beautification, your placemaking. And then should Dayton prioritize messaging? or managing, sorry, not managing the types of locations, so you know, like, where is that new housing development going? Where is your new commercial going? Yes, we want a vision. We want a plan. We want, you know, to know where Dayton's going instead of it just being reactionary, which is what the comprehensive plan is going to try to do. And the last thing we asked, you know, some more just like detail-oriented. What kind of transportation improvements would you like to see, as well as any sort of utility things within the transportation? There was a request for signage along the state road. That was not only, you know, welcoming signage, but also just, you know, like you're entering the town, or like this is like your downtown, or just some sort of signage along that, not speed limit or anything like that. That's separate signage. As well as, you know, recreational trails, and I want to not just walk on a sidewalk, but something else. And then wanting to connect to the city transportation, the bus, they want a couple people requested a bus stop to the Greater Lafayette bus system. And then again, we had some EOS Drive for, as well as EOS Drive against comments, and then a request to look at the railroad crossing to do some improvements on that, whether that be the actual surface itself and the approach from it. And some utility, people wanted higher cell service and a little bit more steady of the broadband. While you guys are covered, there's a couple kind of splotchy areas once you get more to the rural side of it. Looking back at it, you could see kind of who answered those questions. Those were your typical Canoe County people, so your Dayton residents. They don't really say that, but your Tippecanoe County residents did. But they also, you know, what's the opportunity to have a public Wi-Fi, like hotspot area, or like if I, you know, sit in the gazebo with my laptop, or you know, stream on my phone. Someone painted a great picture of wanting to sit on or underneath the gazebo, watching just like a show on a spring day, and I'm like, that sounds lovely. Like, great. Like, I'm so sorry you don't have a hotspot for that. Like, you can use mine. But, also then, looking at the water utility cost, we had multiple comments that that cost was either increased too much, or they were just unhappy with what the cost is now and they wanted it lowered.
We
So we
decreased
just
it 3 months
lowered
ago,
it.
26%.
Okay.
And but one side of this town refuses to admit that and acts like it was never lowered. It's the first time in Dayton history we lowered it. One side thanks us, and it's a great job, and we could have lowered it more if we knew a few more things. But it's been the lowest it's ever been, and it's at least reasonable now. So,
Okay.
you know, if we can lower it more, we will do a new
And it's
study
like-
and lower it more.
Kind of out of our control, you
Right.
know, because we buy our
Sure.
water. So
Yes.
Absolutely. All of
there's
those
little
other
we
things
can
are,
do.
yeah.
But it's just, you know, that's what the comments were.
Sure.
Because these were open-ended
Yeah.
comments, you know,
Yeah.
just whatever you would like to see improved or changed. And then again, just the overall internet coverage. This, you know, your more home connections, things like that, not necessarily what I'm getting on my phone. So some of the key takeaways, we've already talked about some of the themes being, you know, what do we want the vision, the development around the interchange, what do we want to kind of look at. So we're going to look at the future land use map. That's going to be one of our topics, as well as expanding your kind of parks and recreation, retail dining options, maybe some connections for your sidewalks and your trails, and kind of mobility and connectivity, not only between, you know, the communities, but also just within Dayton, you know, south side of the railroad tracks up to your existing sidewalks that are already very well kept on the neighborhoods to the north. And then look at the different, you know, we want an identity. We want to be distinctly Dayton. We want to, you know, this is who we are, this is our character. We're not just a small town. We're a small town that. Which leads into what our visioning is for that. Those are the questions we want to answer. We want to give Dayton its very distinct identity. Which, so all of that is more informational. This is what we've heard. This is what we're doing. Now, the meat and potatoes aspect of it is going into our visioning aspects of it.
So hopefully, as we kind of now gravitate into the kind of shifting that focus, when we start talking about, again, we have the 13 elements to walk through, but when you see some of the ideas under the 13 elements, they hopefully respond to, again, kind of some of the things that, you know, the community has been, you know, speaking about. And obviously, there's some just fundamental things that are also in there, just from best practice, right?
As well as
Um,
needed for Okra hitting those 13.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we start with in your handout here. Now we'll cover the sort of the next series of slides as part of the discussion. So you have that, and we can talk about kind of some of these elements. I think what we would typically like to do is introduce kind of the vision, just get some reaction. If there's some wordsmithing, so again, in any of this, nothing is set in stone, right? This is all just kind of initial draft reaction conversation. And I know there's others on the committee that will certainly send this out to as well, and
Yeah.
you know, kind of request some, you know, chance to, you know, give some review or comment or feedback. So if there are some sort of immediate suggestions to any of the elements that we walk through, we'll certainly take notes and jot those down. Following this evening, if there, you know, as you're kind of studying over the Christmas holiday, right? I'm sure you will be. We'll certainly kind of take that into, you know, consideration as well in terms of other thoughts that you have after the meeting. So with the kind of the structure again of the plan and kind of the way the comprehensive plan articulated by Okra, we have to kind of have that vision statement, right? So what is, you know, in terms of a direction from a planning standpoint, different maybe than the mission of the town, right? Like that could be sort of two different things. But from a planning standpoint, sort of the vision statement for the community, you know, to ensure that the essential needs of the community are met while retaining the unique town atmosphere by encouraging well-planned development, quality spaces, and public services that enhance the existing scale and character that make us distinctly Dayton. And when Sam formatted this, we talked about this, and I was like, let's highlight some of those words or phrases or key concepts that hopefully you just heard that were strongly reinforced in sort of the community input, right?
Yeah.
So things like kind of those quality spaces or kind of that unique town atmosphere, those are things we're trying to take and interpret directly from kind of what we've been hearing to date. So in terms of a broad vision statement for at least the planning side of the community, this is kind of a draft vision statement. And again, if there are some initial reactions, we can talk about this a little bit. If you want to think about it and give us some other kind of feedback later, that's perfectly fine as well. Some communities, because you brought up, like in other rural communities, like, some people really want to get into the wordsmithing of things, you know, and start talking about specific adjectives.
Yeah,
and-
we've had thesaurus.com
All-
pulled up where it's like, what's another word for, like, I don't like this
Yeah.
word, but
So-
I want
so-
some new one.
And that's fair.
So-
So that's totally fair as well.
The one word that like I don't need it changed, but it says by encouraging well-planned development. I don't just want to encourage well-planned development. I want the well-planned development to happen. But like maybe I'm just reading too much into it because like this isn't a legally binding thing, so maybe encouraging is the right word. But in my mind, like, well, I just don't want it to be an encouragement. I want the well-planned development to be what happens.
Yeah, and that goes into the whole, like, well, if you're encouraging it, so that means, you know, I can put unplanned development, things like that. So it's this, think of this more of like, this is your initial kind of identity. Like, you know, first it's what slapping on a billboard kind of thing. Like, if no one, you know, is knowing anything else, you know, this is your first kind of stab
Yeah.
at what it is.
So we
Yeah.
can be
And I
stronger.
do-
Instead of encouraging me, you could be like more, you know, no gray area there. We could
Yeah,
do
it
that
Must
by
be.
encouraging could be, you know, that could be adjusted. So I've circled that. So we could maybe like noodle on that.
Okay.
Just with well-planned development.
Yeah, something,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something that simple.
Yeah. Okay. Other reactions?
I'm so impressed. I could never come up with something like
Yeah.
that. Somebody's very good with their words, Sam.
Thesaurus.com. I need a better word for vibrant. I used it already for a different way.
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't you walk through a little bit in terms of kind of when we put the narrative together and the document together in terms of kind of how it would structure.
Yeah, so, think of it kind of like a pyramid. And, we talk about things building upon each other. Initially, we created some plan elements. These are kind of like overarching themes and everything like that. Again, what's your elevator pitch for who's Dayton, what's Dayton doing, and everything like that. Leading into that, you're going to have your goals. So these are going to be your 13 goal statements that correlate with the Okra categories. And then within each of those goals, we're going to be doing objectives. So this is how are we achieving that goal? What are we doing? And then later, we'll have the action steps. Those are your nitty-gritty details. I need to go after this funding. I need to hire this person. I need to acquire this land. I need to publicize this. Kind of your individual stepping stones to get that objective completed to overall reach that overarching goal within this plan element. So it's the more thorough you get into, the bigger detail that gets into the prioritization. How long am I doing it? When am I doing it? Am I doing it in 10 years, or do I need to be doing this tomorrow? Kind of thing.
So we're not going to talk about the action steps, not because we're just going to figure out like, well, what are the things that we're trying to maybe aspire.
We got to
do.
figure out where we're
Yeah.
going, and then,
then we can
we'll figure out how we're getting there.
Yeah. So we've organized the 13, if you will, kind of plan elements into sort of 3 like-minded buckets or silos that begin to sort of give some organization or some grouping, if you will, to some of the like-minded concepts or potential ideas. And so those include enhancing life outdoors. So
And this is what's on your first
so your first
right
page.
here.
Yeah. So protecting and preserving our natural resources by fostering modern mobility choices. And underneath there, we'll talk about those 4 elements: transportation, parks and rec, natural resources, and hazard mitigation. Promoting quality of design, so respecting and prioritizing community character and vibrant living. We'll talk about those series of plan elements specifically. And then we'll talk about the last group there is more supporting economic prosperity, talking about opportunities for business and to innovate and thrive. So for each one of those, we have kind of a draft goal and a series then of objectives that follow. So I think your handout covers this whole series of 13. So there's a draft goal for each one of them. And I think that's also covered on the objectives. So maybe we can cover
Yes.
all of that. So we, instead of reading through all of this, it's printed right there for each of the 13. But let's talk about each individually. And I think that's a better way to kind of maybe walk through it and maybe get some sort of reaction or discussion related to both the goal as well as the subset, maybe some of the initial objectives related to that goal. So under land use, and there's 2 things here we'll want to kind of reference. So the goal of land use to promote sound development through everyday planning decisions and redevelopment. And so there's a series of objectives there that we've begun to draft. There may be more or fewer, depending on kind of as you have time to sort of review those. The other thing that goes along with the land use is the last page of your handout, a draft of the future land use map. So if we talk about, if I flip back to the sort of the objectives here, we talk about attracting businesses with a marketing strategy. Number 2, encouraging creativity and the design of subdivisions to promote or protect open space. Again, referencing back to we're hearing about this recreation open space, right? So one of the things in terms of land use would be like, okay, if a developer's coming, making sure that you're requiring something in relation to that, right? Number 3, expanding the range and intensities of maybe the future land use plan. Working with the Area Plan Commission for some participation for sustainable growth and development, and then evaluating existing land use control. So that goes to what we were talking about earlier related to the, as an action step that may follow any kind of comprehensive plan would be maybe a update to a zoning ordinance or adjustment to a zoning ordinance perhaps, if there is something that you're trying to achieve that right now your ordinance policy doesn't permit or doesn't include, right? Well, then you're not going to be able to achieve it, right? So that would be something that you may want to look at doing. We don't know what that would be, but that would be something that you may want to evaluate once this process is completed. So I guess, reaction in terms of kind of the goal statement or some of those initial objectives related to land use. Do any of those feel appropriate or not appropriate? Yep.
Instead of promoting sound development, can we ensure sound development, which that word was already used in the beginning, so maybe
Okay.
a different word, but like, again, not just promoting sound development, but like
Gotcha.
having the sound development
want,
happen.
we want a firm stance. This
Right.
is what
Mhm.
we want.
Because so much of like what has happened to us.
Okay.
And I'm so tired of things happening to us because like, well, we tried, but it just happened to us. Like, no, we're gonna make sure sound development happens.
Okay. I think that's, I mean, yeah, that can be stronger there, certainly.
We initially, for our first draft things, some communities don't want strong words because they want it to be more open to interpretation. But so you may see that in the rest of them, more of the not ambiguous words,
Yeah.
Wishy-washy.
Wish
but softer.
Softer.
Never wishy-washy.
Yeah, yeah.
But
But I think
we
that's good.
we can definitely do stronger, kind of that verbiage.
At least, or especially for land use. I just feel like because we don't have unlimited land, that needs to be so important. I mean, it doesn't need to be, it is so important. I just feel like we need to be
Yep.
very particular and like
I agree with-
purposeful and
I agree with your proposed area for land. We got two main areas for growth. The proposed Yost Drive area and south of Dayton. South of Dayton, over half of that is taken up by one builder. Up by the interchange, there's two farms there, and they all want it, the two owners want warehouses. So when those two get what they want, there'll be no quarter acre, fifth acre, whatever. And what I see most of the time when we talk about promoting land use and everything is all the people I talk to, they don't really know the difference, like in zoning, David, the difference between what you would put on R1 industrial. They say, well, Carr's going to have industrial up there. Well, we can put some restaurants in there.
That's
Well, you
not-
can't.
Correct.
No.
You know,
So that's
and-
why on the land use here, you see we've introduced, so the land use, again, are not zoning classifications, so they're not directly correlated. However, they do influence what could potentially be a zoning classification. So if we kind of look at the sort of the draft map, the green dotted line, just for reference again, keep in mind that's your existing boundary. The black areas are potential areas of future growth that you may or may not want to provide some suggestion for. Because again, as we referenced, typically they're waiting to kind of see what you're suggesting or wanting, and so as they update theirs, if you have some suggestion, that would obviously be influenced in terms of as they would move into their process. Within your green area, so the existing sort of town boundary, if we talk about that first, that area on the sort of the northwest quadrant, we've introduced that salmony orange color. It's called mixed use. Instead of a land use classification of that entire area just being in blanket industrial. So that would allow you to have the conversation of, again, does your zoning need to be adjusted to allow flexibility for some other type of uses there outside of the industrial classifications? So from our land use standpoint, that's kind of how we began to sort of address that at a more broad conversational level. And is that appropriate or not appropriate?
That's a lot of purple.
Well, that's where it is currently.
Yeah, what we've done at
That's
purple
suits
is
right
the existing.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
That's the
So
only
we
thing
only
that we
have
put as
30
purple.
Inside our town limits, we only have 30 acres as your orange color.
So again,
So why
a
didn't
future
you-
land use, that could go away. Because if you think about future land uses, that what's there now doesn't mean that's what's there 10, 20, 30 years from now. So that purple could all go away if you want to be that aggressive about
Yeah.
it.
Why didn't the black line and the potential growth area go up
We can include, we can
above the
go,
salmon?
we can,
Yeah.
Because we own, technically this green line, well, I guess it's not in the town, but we own this.
We own
This
11 and a
land
half
here.
acres going clear up to Haggard.
so
Okay.
mark where that is. Because
Okay.
we can show as much or as little. Those growth areas we just threw out there for discussion purposes. So how,
We own
listen,
this.
this
So
town-
the thoroughfare.
So that's a
going to
very
run
important.
that like
Mhm.
thing. Okay.
you own the thoroughfare, but you don't own.
Because that was the
None of the land on either side, right?
Yeah.
we went
But
to
I feel like that
annex.
area is super important.
You know, we want to annex it, and people, I feel the most majority of people want to annex that land up there, but the owners of the land didn't want to go through with the annexation because they wanted to rezone it first so they could control what went in there.
yeah.
So everybody knows that will be Dayton. We have all the water rights and
Okay.
sewage rights. Nobody else does up to Haggerty. So that should be Dayton, but the question is, they won't let us annex it because they want to control the zoning and then put all the warehouses.
So
on.
from a future land use, if we extend that up there and talk about that as a future growth area, is it the salmon mixed use color or is it residential? What kind of land uses
Both.
would you see?
I think
Well, mixed use could include residential, but residential is much more of a defined,
mixed use.
okay.
The old.
They want it all purple.
Yeah, the old plan was mixed use, NB, GB, residential mixed in with green spaces and parks.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
That the area of the plan had
Yeah,
for
so-
30 years, and it's a great plan.
Okay, so that would be, if we, in a land use kind of classification, give it mixed use, it would really
Cover
fall in
those.
line with that idea or concept.
So I would say take the orange or the salmon and just
Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
extend it.
Up to her.
Okay,
Mhm.
and we can include that with the black, like a future, potential future growth area, then, that I think is good. And we're okay with the, kind of that idea of introducing a mixed use category.
And is that to the limit of to Dayton Road or also still on the other side of that?
You mean to Haggerty?
No, Haggerty is your
North
Uh-huh.
northern, but
You mean down to 38?
The interstate
Yeah.
over to Dayton Road.
I mean like so we're talking so like the city owns here and everything. We're talking this, but like
Yes.
on the other side
Oh.
of this road into your floodplain more area.
Or stopping it at the road, you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, I'm asking. Are we
The
stopping?
eastern
Oh,
boundary.
you're asking
The
about
eastern
the
boundary.
salmon color. Should we extend
Yes.
it that way?
The
Yeah.
eastern boundary here,
Your western boundary is the interstate.
Right.
Yeah.
correct.
I think going up Dayton Road, everything to the east you're talking about is always sort of,
Mushy.
in everybody's mind, been for, just like the south end, more R1 housing, you know, single family housing.
And Scott, I didn't mark on your map the land that the town owns in the town limits. But you see how it comes over and then it doesn't quite meet up, which doesn't make sense when you're looking at it. But
It jumps a little bit.
yeah, it comes over and then it goes straight
It
down.
does in reality, but all the maps.
Right,
show
the
it.
maps are wonky. That's ours too.
Which-
I just didn't.
That giant corridor that we saw.
Oh,
um,
yeah.
Comes right down the high
Yes.
drive.
Yes, that's all, yeah. But in terms of the class, that wouldn't have a different land use
No,
classification.
I just wanted to make sure. you
But
knew.
that's gonna show up on our transportation map, so a different map, that corridor will show up, but in terms of the land use map, it would be,
Yeah.
yeah.
So kind of double dipping a little bit when it comes to like we'll talk about it more in the transportation. But say if we do put future land use, mixed use up to Haggerty and everything, would that then quote support the extension of Yost Drive? I know
It's so
I got
tricky
hard
because-
questions.
I know
You-
this.
You put Yost in and then you just got a bunch of industrial, you just semi, we call it semi-alley.
Last year, in the meetings with their lawyers and with the owners up there, we said we wanted to see what was going in there before we committed to Yost Drive and water and sewage. Because in this world of big money around here, you say one word wrong and they come in and they slap it, they get a board in here, or a few friends, and they rezone that whole thing, you're sunk. Like they got it rezoned right now. You know, we're sunk, so why would we, so the people of this town don't really want to put Yost Drive in to nothing but warehouses. Now, if they came and had a 100-year plan that says there'll be mixed use and there'll be something for the town, from restaurants to laundromats to.
So that would all be
housing.
articulated when we describe what the mixed use character is. So in this chapter, that's what we would want to articulate. Yep.
We've actually asked the right-hand side of Yost Drive, from Yost Drive to Dayton Road, one farmer owns all that except 5 acres. And we asked if they would be willing to work with us and let us put our own road through there with a mixed use that would be really great for Dayton. And their answer was, line out it all, to line out all their houses, because it's just quick money, they just sell it all at one person.
Yeah, so I think this, again, that would all be articulated as part of this chapter in terms of what that mixed-use vision is, and then obviously working with the Area Plan Commission, that would have to be supported there in terms of if there is a zoning update that maybe were to occur, that to better reflect the broader vision of not just industrial, if that's the desire.
Okay, now, another area, we're south of the railroad tracks, behind, the existing, landscaping, as well as kind of connecting the development. There's a couple parcels, behind it that, could be, into the residential, as well as that gap between, the church and, is currently what we're showing as the boundaries, don't encompass, but like I said, it's a parcel that can be included into it. But then we identified 3 potential growth areas outside of that. And is that still in the aspect of residential, or are you thinking maybe something else?
What are your 3?
Oh, you know the south side here, right?
Yes.
The 3 on the south side, so.
Some of it,
you're talking-
The light green?
yeah.
Inside the black,
okay.
yeah.
Some of
So
those,
there's no color, so what color
Right.
would we make?
Or we don't have to, like, that may not be something you want to even,
No, I think it definitely needs to be included as a potential growth
Well,
area
down
and
here-
do some smart planning.
some of it's already existing residential, but other places there's some
Your-
gaps in it.
Your square on the right, it's like a baseball diamond area to the right, the light green. That potential area is all the old Kraus land is 60 acres. That's all owned privately by residential. There is no potential. This and this. This area we developed. This woods area is what, down over the hill, the daughters and the father all own. That's already taken up as,
but it's, okay, so and then that's, take that off then.
you'd
Yes.
have to.
Yeah, because
Okay, that's fine.
they're gonna keep their
Did you
parcel
provide-
with their house to the
Do you,
woods.
when that kind of development happens, do you provide local town services and utilities there?
That's
Right,
outside
okay, yeah, I was like, we've run into numerous communities that like do, say it's, an Arby's, and I'm not saying this is an Arby's, but, somebody goes in, they provide it, and then like, they're not part of the community, but then you got nothing in return.
Yeah,
Yeah, you've
Right.
already given
Given
them
up what you have.
all of your bargaining
Yes.
chips of things.
I would include
So
them
we'll
like
take
as
that
our
off.
community, because they're right there, but they just don't.
But that's not a growth area for the town, like the town boundary would never include that, is what I'm saying.
Correct.
Right, and then
Yeah. Okay, so that
goes
the
off.
southern potential area down there to the east of
Peshua?
Dayton Road, that's all Peshua Drive and all housing right now. There is no,
Correct, but would that ever be part of the town? Like, would the town boundaries ever incorporate there?
Long-term, think.
oh, okay, well, yeah, I mean, eventually. it
So we could have these people in our town and have these people in our town, but it just wouldn't be like,
You're not
let's
gonna-
add them and make them mixed use.
No, that,
Tear down their houses and
Correct.
put
So
an
you
industrial area.
can put like the land use, like we want this to stay residential with the potential, future, maybe they get willingly annexed into it, or
Oh.
we're not saying, we want this residential, so we're gonna tear down these 6 houses and
Correct.
we're gonna put a development in there. It's
The
more so
guideline
just,
of our 100-year water agreement with Lafayette is between Haggerty and Wyandotte. And the reason for that is that was all a potential future Dayton area, contained area, bordered by the interstate and by the creek down below. So that was, we just haven't got that far. We did Malacca's rezone that and or annexed it and put it in there, or the old board did. But eventually we'd go down the
so
road.
this is then appropriate to stay in as a potential growth area?
Well, I feel like both would. Wouldn't Adams Road too?
Yeah,
I
I
mean-
thought you meant for development.
No,
Yeah.
no, just
So I would leave
Dayton growing as,
Yeah, leave those in.
control of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
so-
they talked about Adams Road too, going to put over Adams Road.
Okay,
Part
right,
of
so I
it.
just took that one out.
Sorry,
So we're
yeah.
gonna bring that back in,
Yeah.
and again, the color is yellow, right? Like, that's what you're
Residents-
saying.
Yeah, right.
But it is a potential in terms of, again, we don't ever wanna say annexation, because that's like zoning is a whole
That's legal
separate thing,
thing.
and it's a whole,
Right.
the future land use map is not meaning you're
Right.
doing that. But there are things in terms of, from a town standpoint, if you're thinking about long-term utilities, as an example, service areas, emergency response, if you're thinking about planning for these kind of like things, you have to know like, well, what am I planning for? That's
Yeah.
what this really is designed to kind of get you
it
to
shows
think.
like intentions. So like say for example, you had no intentions of going up to Haggerty. Okay, well you're not going to build out your utilities up to Haggerty if you have no intention of growing
Yeah,
in
we
that direction.
definitely have.
See, they-
So with that being said, is everything within the black line, at this point, a potential in terms of when I say growth area, like a potential to someday be considered within the town boundary? Is that fair?
Yes.
That's what they talked about in the
Okay.
past, yes.
Okay, so we'll keep.
What made the boundary like straight down from 38 across Adams Road that like this rectangle here? Why didn't the potential growth area follow Adams Road? Out of curiosity.
I think because you can't, it sort of stopped because where that light green line is by the left of the baseball diamond, it drops down over the hill there, and that's the old reservoir floodplain area.
Oh.
And
I
they
think
didn't,
it's-
and they didn't
Yes,
ever wanna,
yes.
they could use that in the town for other reasons, but not to really, I don't think
Gotcha.
the intent was ever to supply them water or sewage, because it'd be so costly to bring it
I
up.
think that's
It's
correct.
like
It's
you
up
were
above.
in my
Get out of Sam's head.
exactly what you
Yeah.
just said.
Okay.
So when it comes to future growth with that creek, it is that.
Yeah.
We didn't have it on the map because it would take up that whole entire upper corner, but that is within your flood zone and floodway.
Gotcha.
So
Makes sense.
we kept the areas that like potentially like a little bit into it and everything, but not
Where Jen up there on the north side, up by 38, that little green piece that goes out, that's all
Yeah.
behind those houses, that's all
Mhm.
flat, it's developmental land, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
you could add more houses.
Yeah.
So how we'll usually kind of portray this in terms of your mapping and talking about it, we'll talk about kind of again, here's your future land use plan within your current limits, right? And we'll define like what all of those categories are, articulate what those in terms of definition and examples or photo or what have you in terms of kind of what that means. And you'll have the graphic with sort of within your current limits. And then we'll talk about, future opportunities or future growth areas, and then we'll have a second graphic that then highlights sort of the existing boundary plus these other areas. So you'll have kind of, in essence, the future land use map that you actually would adopt is just within your town, what you're controlling now, right? Like, it's just what you have now. But you're providing some suggestion, if you will, or some guidance or vision for kind of what influences or is adjacent to you in terms of 10, 30 years from now. This is kind of some long-term potential of where we could see some impact or growth. And growth doesn't necessarily mean new development if there's something, but maybe the town boundary changing or altering. So does that make sense of how we would graphically sort of show both of those?
It would be a real good idea to delineate between the two salmon areas. The one is
Okay, yeah.
compact urban fine.
Okay, so two
Downtown.
different kind of mixed use kind of ideas.
Yeah, and
Okay.
probably even go into some description as to what's desired for the future business park area. I think the more descriptive, the better in terms of influencing future zoning and land use decisions up there.
Yeah, because we can even go into like the details, like growth area A.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah, or sometimes we
we're
give them a
going-
name like town
That's-
center versus downtown or
That makes
whatever.
sense.
Yeah.
That way there's two different broad land use classifications that are related in terms of kind of the types of, maybe here it's like you want somebody to live above, work below. That's a mixed use, right?
Mhm.
Out there, it's maybe I want a restaurant and a off, like together, So it's a mix of those things, but it's organized differently.
Very different mixed uses.
Yeah.
That,
Okay, and it's a good
that land
suggestion.
use, that part up there you're talking about, just so you know, it's not accessible right now, there's nothing to it.
Correct.
Yeah,
They need our Dayton
Correct.
Road to get there.
Correct.
And those, or they have to come and put the road through their property.
Yeah, we drove up Yost and we were like, well, here's where it's going to go if we do
Yeah.
something like we have the potential for it. We just need to figure out.
You go up the Yost Drive or to the future dog trails, walking
No,
We just, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, we did our little lap of that little tea. Yes.
Okay, well, this is an important kind of, I think, conversation in terms of the land use discussion, certainly. So I don't want to necessarily move off of this if there's something. I think that's a good point. I like your idea of the two different sort of mixed-use definitions. So we can certainly develop something for that. We've got some direction on the sort of the future growth areas, I think, both some additional ones there to the north. Is there any other, before we move off the land use conversation, is there any, and obviously you can continue studying it and give us some other feedback, but are there any other immediate reactions that you have?
There's also other elements on this map that we haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah, okay. But we're not moving from this map. We're
No,
just
we'll
moving from-
come back to this
Okay.
map for other elements.
Okay.
But just on land use.
Okay, so let's maybe move to kind of some of the other, because there's 12 other topics here. But some of these maybe can be, again, very broad, and again, I know you're reading this for the first time, so we don't expect you to have kind of maybe a sort of immediate reactions necessarily.
Yeah, we don't need a yes, no right now.
But we would probably need some of that endorsement, so as I said, we'll package this up, send it out to the entire steering committee with some
Yeah.
instructions regarding like, you know, this is what we went through, here's the materials, and we need you to read through these and give us any responses in terms of some questions and
This is
or
unnecessary.
Yes.
You completely missed this
Yes.
topic.
Yeah.
This is really good. You know, like
Yeah.
support this.
So the next one there was government, so number 2, that government and fiscal capacity, grow the community through fiscally responsible decisions and the ability of the town to support the growth. And you can see there's 4, and I won't read them, but there are 4 initial objectives related to that goal. So if, again, where you're talking, Jen, in terms of like, you know, maybe on some of the wording, if there needs to be more of a definitive aggressive, that's totally fine. Like,
I love that.
all
I
of
love
this
that
is
goal.
all. So just because we get through and introduce all these, so you know what you're kind of looking at or studying. The public facilities and services continue to provide high efficiency community utilities, facilities, and services. So everything here talks about kind of some programmatic things, some perhaps new ideas regarding green infrastructure, your solar panel discussion that you were having earlier regarding the town hall. We would want to insert that here if
Yeah,
that's something that you want to, you know, if you're doing that, we would want to include that here because then that's something on the comp plan you can check off, like this was
Yeah.
something
We
that
can-
an action
yeah.
item you achieved.
And it could even be, you know, explore the option
Correct.
of, you know, installing solar into town
hall.
facilities. Yeah.
Yes, that would be how that would be phrased, and we can add that now that we know that that's something you're considering.
Yeah.
And then, for example, like that would have action steps. You know, research legislation regarding solar installation.
Yeah.
Look at different financial things. You know, individual things would be underneath that objective of explore solar.
The plan element number 4, placemaking. So celebrate Dayton's historic character and arts culture while also showcasing the community's unique identity. So this really, a lot of those bricks and mortar kind of things that you heard in terms of the survey, in terms of some of the visual enhancements, whether that's again some corridor enhancements. It could even be rebranding of everything from the town website and how it's sort of presented, right? So you have a consistent message or sort of theme or brand that you're communicating both in maybe some physical gateway, right, as you come off the interstate to your promotional materials that you're putting out, right? So it's all related and coordinated. So some of those placemaking things are articulated there in terms of some of those objectives.
And that leads onto the map. We've identified 2 initial locations for what those gateways could be. Off of,
Location-wise.
yeah, location-wise, around the interchange, right next to that shield, as well as off of 38 on that limit.
So one on the east and one on the west.
Yes.
The one on the west would may want to move up.
Yeah, move up a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
New signage.
Right, so signage would be in this category. Yep, so did we not include that? Oh, yes, so we talked about number 3, they're develop and strengthen community gateways through uniform signage program, redevelopment, and other beautification efforts. So if we want signage, sometimes we can do that separately, right? We can talk about maybe a community gateway project, and then signage as a separate, those can be 2 separate things if we want to call that out separately. Okay,
A lot of people talk about new signs on each
okay,
end.
so we'll do
Yeah.
gateways and signage, 2 separate ones.
Would it include like the pretty archway?
That was a
could be
comment
gateway.
within the survey as well. Someone wanted a more like I'm officially here aspect. They used examples, you know, like I know I'm in Lebanon because of the
Yeah.
panels and everything, but then they also called there like there's giant archways that are literally on the edge of town that I go underneath, and I'm now into this community. Others, it could be more like a monumental thing, you know, like stone lit up at night and everything that has, you know, like welcome to Dayton
Right.
and things like that.
And we can get some, we'll get some examples.
Yeah,
like that.
of
We could even do
different
Yeah.
scales.
We
of it.
oftentimes throw in some renderings of different kind
Oh,
of things,
that's
and so we
great.
could throw in a rendering there too,
Love
just to
that.
give an idea.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But then within that, it it goes and establishes more of like the identity of Dayton.
Distinctly Dayton.
Yeah, distinctly Dayton.
We're not just entering a different part of Lafayette.
Yes, I'm not a neighborhood of Lafayette. Like I'm my own community.
So plan element 5, economic development, or as the slide says, eco, nice development?
It blended
Maybe it's
together
French,
right.
I don't know.
It's
Support employers and entrepreneurs in their efforts to expand and locate in Dayton. So this is, again, if you recall on the survey work, that the sort of the business employment climate was sort of a look, because again, people were kind of, I think, assuming that like internally to Dayton, maybe that was a non-issue. However, for those that that you want to do that with, that maybe is something that there are perhaps some elements, particularly maybe in the downtown, so thinking about a downtown revitalization strategy for this kind of core area, maybe a business incubator or co-working space within Dayton, obviously partnering with the local chamber. I'm assuming you already do some of that, so some of that probably would just be a continuation of those kind of things. So those would be some of the items related to sort of the business community or business development.
Would,
Sorry.
sorry.
You go first.
Okay. Would this include businesses, like, because so many people want retail and dining? Would that be in this? Because this is a lot about, like, employers and creating jobs.
Yeah, I
But-
can see that.
So many people didn't care about working here. They wanted to spend their money here. Right? Like, they wanted places to eat and places to
We're
buy.
tired of running into Lafayette.
No.
So would number 5 be where we needed to hit on that?
It can be. I think so. Maybe let's restructure that. So supports of employers. Maybe we can support growth both on the commercial and business, business community. So maybe cover both of them in that goal statement, and then we can add a couple of objectives related specifically to the commercial sector or commercial retail sector that you just described. Is that fair?
Yeah. Dining, I feel like,
Yeah.
even when I'm talking to people, that is
Everything.
actually dining.
So then I was gonna ask, a lot of comments that we heard from the public was wanting to establish more of a downtown core. So right now I've just kind of done a little focus area around the downtown, where I classify the downtown. Would you agree with that kind of rough boundary? It doesn't have to be, this parcel, not that parcel, but more so like this intersection, focused it around the town hall, but didn't go over the railroad tracks or that far out.
Well, we've got planned next spring, we're gonna put this whole square here, we're gonna put like new street lights with the banners and everything that we can change monthly and everything to sort of emphasize with our gazebo this,
Yes,
Park,
this
this
community
downtown
area, this
community.
public area.
yeah.
Okay.
And, just to really everything around, mostly there's not big open spaces and stuff, except, you know, this burnout area over here, we can do stuff with that, planning, that's some thoughts of
Okay, let's think about housing. Number 6, establish a balanced housing stock for residents of all ages, incomes, and stages of life. So this is related a little bit to, so we have to cover the housing topic in terms of the plan elements, and one of the things that, if you recall in the survey and some of the public input, maybe again a little bit more diversification, not necessarily in terms of the density, but in terms of the opportunity for like maybe seniors or other kind of housing stock that maybe is different, because maybe some want something that's not just a detached single family. You can't maybe get that here. That's what you have, right? So there are a couple of things there in terms of some objectives there, perhaps that addresses maybe some aging in place, those kind of things that maybe would be appropriate here to
it. One good
retain or
spot
attract
on
that.
that is, the church owns 10 acres down
Yeah.
here,
Let's see that.
and they always planned a senior area
Okay,
there.
perfect. See, that kind of thing.
Do we
would be
know
support-
if that's still the plan?
That would be, this would be in support of,
Sort of think so.
that would be
And then-
supportive of that. Yep.
Right
It's not-
across the road, they could do the same thing in that area. I mean, it's all geared for housing and stuff, or like senior stuff. Well, maybe they aren't anymore, but
Yeah.
I'm,
that's what they always plan.
So if that were to move forward and this was in, this would then be supportive of that, that kind of idea.
number 2, attract new diverse housing, blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure we need to attract new rentals. I am pretty sure we are well stocked on rentals.
We got 181 rentals in this town. 1 out of every 3 houses is a rental.
We do not need to attract more.
But your rentals are all detached, single-family properties predominantly, correct?
Predominantly,
But there's a
yes.
few of them that they're a single family one, and we'll be talking to David Hill here. But they're being used as duplexes and upstairs and downstairs and stuff like that. So the town will sometime probably have a list to look into.
So, Dayton Cove, how many places is that? Do you know? Because there's Dayton Cove, there's the apartments here, there's the apartments here, right?
Yeah, there's eight units, and then Dayton Cove is probably
6,
13
15?
units with 2 each,
So
so
30
it's
something.
26. So.
Yeah.
So as an example, in your mixed use and the acreage that would be up there that we talked about in the future land use, in theory, a different type of rental product could perhaps be introduced. Who knows, right? But the price point could be perhaps different than price points either higher or lower. But I don't know what your price points here are currently. So I think that's fine. We can strike the sort of the rental in terms of a specific call out. What we can't do is ever say you want like none of that.
Right.
Like,
I don't want more single family rentals. Like, I don't want more people buying a house to rent out that
Gotcha.
house.
gotcha.
Yeah, we don't need to emphasize it
Yes.
per se, but we can't say no.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
you can do in terms of things, if rentals are a problem, you can create like a rental registry in terms of things, and so a community can monitor like better, like that way, versus saying like you not allowing rental. That you can't do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I don't know. I
Yeah.
didn't even imagine that was an option.
So
I
like a
just.
program like that can be something that you try to work with more, because a lot of communities that have particularly like out-of-state landlords, then that becomes a problem. So you at least try to keep like contact information, like that's what the registry does. It doesn't say you can do or not do it, it just tries to keep contact information, right?
Yeah.
So those kind of things, again, to try to strengthen maybe the relationship in terms of communication, strengthen the communication. So that could be something that
Jim, you're against people buying existing houses and turning them into family-owned houses, turning them into rentals. Are you against, say, in a new field down here, developing
No.
rental duplex units?
No.
Okay, so that's so again, that word maybe
Yeah.
has different definitions for different people. If you take that out, it doesn't really change number 2 per se.
Yeah.
'Cause the multifamily or age in place housing, that could be a rent. I mean, all that could be a rental, not a home.
Age in
home.
place housing, is that like a senior?
Senior.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Could use that word.
That's where we're sending her on.
That's why it's age in place, you know, technically where I'm at, I'm aging in my place. I've lived there.
Well, in theory, that's broad in terms of, you know, like the idea of like a community being able to offer, because right now, if you have to, if you were like, I need to go to a patio home, or I don't want to take care of a lawn, then I'm no longer in this place, right? I have to go out.
Yeah,
I have to move away.
yeah. We don't
So
want
that's
to
the
go
broader, not just saying senior, because that's too narrow in terms of like, oh, I have to be whatever the age classification
Sure.
or the senior definition
Yeah,
is,
I
right?
do like that.
Aging in place is
Yeah, I love that.
anyone, to be able to stay
Yeah.
invested in the community,
Yeah.
you have to have the offering to do
Yeah.
that.
Love
It could appeal to seniors, but it could maybe appeal to somebody else too.
We do
Yeah.
have one senior unit, the 8 units coming in is for seniors over 55.
It is?
And also factors in, when some people think of senior living, they think, you know, those giant buildings that they pretty much have a hotel room in,
Yeah.
whereas
Oh.
age in place, some of them, they're just their own pretty much housing unit or like small apartment and everything, and it's just, yeah, it's just the extra things when it comes to home ownership that they are no longer able to do themselves.
All right, I want to be respectful of everyone's time because we're approaching kind of the end of our 90 minutes that we kind of scheduled. We can continue going to go through and introduce we're halfway through kind of the categories. So we can continue going through that. And obviously we want you to take these worksheets home and study them more as well. So throw that out there to I don't want to, if somebody had something or if we want to continue maybe going through the rest of them here real quickly.
I'm fine continuing. David, are you fine? Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so let's move forward then. Number 7, transportation, improve mobility infrastructure and expand connectivity. So obviously we've been talking about that a lot in terms of sidewalk, opportunities for pedestrian connection. And this one obviously would have a graphic that would go with it as well. You've had your sidewalk condition survey and mobility assessment. We want to
And that's
fold
what's on
that.
the screen
We
right
want to
now.
fold that right in, right? So like areas that we're talking about in terms of deficiencies or no access or what have you, or some of the, like, you'd want to prioritize, like, we would reinforce that, right? You'd want to work on elevating that.
And also just additional connectivity to, different points, whether that be the elementary school, whether that be over to Lafayette or to parks or things like that. That was a big focus within the public engagement was, I want to be able to transverse myself, and things like that. But that's also goes into the more programmatic aspects of it, like safe routes to school. My kids want to be able, not my kids, I don't have kids, but kids to be able to get to school. That's more of a programmatic thing instead of your bricks and mortar. So transportation as a whole is for the physical improvements I need done, but what are maybe some programs to be in place.
What's the word in the way of it? 1, 2, 3.
Issues. How
Oh,
many
issues.
we have?
Okay, I can't
And-
read it.
This was done, like, obviously, we're continually trying to improve sidewalks, so this is already kind of out of date.
Okay.
It's a great starting point
But,
for us in
yeah.
terms of like folding that in. And I think whatever that's fine if it's out of date because we would reference this graphic in terms of, as of
Correct.
whatever it was,
Yeah.
spring 2022.
Yeah.
And clearly you're going to be checking some of these projects off by having in the comp plan would be, if you will, we're going to continue working on this. So it just reinforces and endorses that.
Yeah, we've done a lot of sidewalks in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And Jen's really pushing on it. She trips in it.
What the?
One times.
But we have done more than we've done in 30 years, sidewalks.
Number 8, agriculture, preserve and promote the character and viability of the local agricultural industry. So again, this may be one that's sort of like, if you think within your town limits, you're like, agriculture, I don't have any, there's not a farm inside per se, right? So, when we're doing a county comp plan through the Okra process, this becomes a bigger topic for us to address. When we're talking about, a town, we do need to comment on it clearly because it's one of the Okra elements, but it's not necessarily perhaps one that has a whole lot of very aggressive or goals related to, the actual farm, if you will, process or ag land. In this case, we provided some ideas regarding maybe the working with the sort of the agritourism, maybe something like that, or making sure that when we're talking about those future growth areas, that we're being sensitive to some of the lands that may be appropriate regarding some environmental issues, or when we talk about some of those that maybe weren't so conducive for development if they were a floodplain or what have you. So I don't know if there's anything initially in the agricultural category here that stands out at you. Similarly, the natural resources one, number 9, preserve the natural environment as an important asset. So you have some things that are adjacent, like the Wildcat Creek as a natural assets, and you have some floodplains of the Fairfield? Yeah, Lakes Park. That's sort of in the region, but nothing necessarily specifically within the town boundaries to speak of that, I don't know, we initially sort of thought of. So it's a lot of things that are related to more of making sure you're sensitive to those surrounding. Some things that you could do internally, if a green infrastructure is something you want to explore, we put that in there. And then a lot of communities, because of the age of the community and when you're kind of thinking about kind of maybe your tree canopy along the main thoroughfares, maybe conducting a tree inventory to sort of determine, like, are there some things that are, obviously with the ash disease that kind of went through, like you probably were struck by that, and maybe getting a handle on other trees that maybe they're close to the end of their lifespan, and if so, if that comes out, does a new one come in? So maybe have an inventory of that. So that's more of an urban, if you will, kind of natural resource discussion versus, again, if we're doing a planning element for on this on a county-wide level, we'd have different natural resources issues to talk about.
Are there grants for things like that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, the DNR, others, they kind of maybe come and go sometimes, but some of those things are potentially have some funding opportunities.
Do any other towns, there's always been a question that there's a lot of large trees around, and who takes care of them, the property owner or the town? And we've always had the property owner take care of them.
So those would be more, again, so the inventory would determine who owns it, right?
Yeah.
And then your ordinance, then, not your zoning ordinance, but you'd have your local ordinance that would should articulate some of those sort of things, just like it would nuisance kind of ordinance, those kind of things should all be in there. So as long as you're clear on that, but the inventory would at least give you an idea of what in the public realm, what do you as the public own, right?
Yeah.
And what are their conditions? So.
And back to your funding thing. So this is still, our visioning where we want to go. The next step that we would go into is the action steps, and within that and the implementation, which is after that, we actually, give your priority. This is something you should be thinking about within the next 5 to 10 years. These are the outside parties that you either need to coordinate with or you should coordinate with, like property owners or like a different organization, developers, things like that. And then we also identify potential funding sources, and then that's a resource that we put in your guys' appendix. And this is the agency that this grant is. Here's a little description. They do it biannually. They do it once a year kind of thing. So you guys really have the action steps of okay, I'm going to do a tree inventory. I need to apply for this grant.
Yeah.
It's going to get me this much. I should, we've prioritized it as a high one. So, this is something 1 to 2 years kind of thing. And that's what the later steps are going into.
So the next one, recreation, expand high-quality recreational amenities, a variety of, items here regarding high-priority issues from the public input, right? That kind of these facilities are important. One of the things that maybe would be beneficial if you're talking about funding, in order to get maybe some funding for land acquisition or even playground equipment or what have you, perhaps again through LWCF funding or Department of Natural Resources, you have to have a Parks and Rec board, and you do not have one currently. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So again, that opens. Do you have to have that to have a park? No. But in order to maybe qualify for some funding for some of these things, you have to have that. because you have to have a 5-year parks plan to talk about, again, this is what we're trying to do on the park standpoint. So those would be two kind of things that you'd want, if again, like that was something that you're interested in exploring as a community, whether it be land or, again, and go after, it just broadens your grant or funding opportunities, or resource opportunities, I would say, is what I would suggest there. Does the SIA, so does that need to go off,
Correct.
since we've determined that that is not available for
Not
any public?
accessible.
Correct.
We can still connect to it, but you're well, on the transportation side, I think, the idea of having that connection on like this whole thing, that's not never a bad thing, right? Like,
Mhm.
but in terms of marketing, you're not gonna market that if that's not something that the community can use.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, and then does this lot, does it have a name? Like, is it, Dayton?
Town Hall Park, we don't want to
It
call it.
needs
I
one.
sometimes, we sometimes refer to it as
Throw
like,
them somewhere else.
yeah,
The green,
the town green or.
The
Well,
gazebo.
Okay, so that goes back to the branding that was on the
Yeah.
previous page under
Yeah.
placemaking. Again, not having a constant brand or something that you can communicate on a variety of things, that's an example of that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure I wasn't missing a name.
Okay. So broadband, our last three here are fairly small. Again, these are elements that, again, depending on the community, there are some broader or bigger issues. I think on all three of these, for you, they're fairly, I don't say minor as in unimportant, I just mean minor in terms of you don't have a lot of deficiencies or challenges in these areas. So broadband, as Sam said, we've kind of done the mapping and there, overall, it's
Overall, it's good
Yeah.
within the town itself.
yeah, so I think it's again making sure that you're just keeping that competitive and working with your local providers, and then if there's anything in terms of some upgrades or what have you, maybe some next level connections application for funding is always an opportunity, so those are things that could be a potential resource for you on that. Historic and archaeological resources, number 12, establish and enhancing the downtown area as a historic, unique, and vibrant focal point for the community. So this even goes to your branding of like this space we were just talking about, right? Like, so we could even put that something in here in terms of the sort of, again, it's a tie-in to the recreation one, number 10, but sort of the marketing and utilization of the town green or whatever it's called, right? The town commons.
Right, or
Dayton
commons
Commons.
or square, we've thrown around several.
Yeah.
Put a little contest.
Yeah.
Ask people, let them come up
Yeah.
with names,
Yeah.
Okay.
and then go to school.
But then you go start for-
Other things here, there, I think, to help me out, Cindy, we looked at the mapping, there are contributing historic structures.
Yes, you do have multiple contributing, so that's on the historic registry,
Yes.
and that is what can be used to classify as a historic district, which then again opens up another form of funding for it. But you have contributing as well as they classify it as it's like satisfactory or something like that, where it's like it's
Supporting.
yeah, supporting there, and
Yeah,
it was
supporting.
it was supported, so it's not like it's not very specific, but it's almost there. So give it another 20 years, it'll be contributing kind of
We
thing.
do have an historic
Yeah.
district
Yes.
on record
Yes,
that we did years ago, 20 years ago.
yes, and so you have a specific number
So that's the thing,
that
there's,
within it, but we need to capitalize
Mhm.
on
right, so
that
you don't
historic
have any
district.
design regs that right now are guidelines for within that district. You have the district established, but you could do whatever you want in terms of
Right.
character or modification or what have you.
Well, we do follow, I think, area plan, some rule, because when the one brick
Okay.
house down here was ripped down, there's a question, it was right on the line.
Okay,
And they said we had to follow, we couldn't tear it, or the owners
Gotcha.
couldn't tear it down because of area plan, But then it was ripped down, it was too far gone.
gotcha, okay.
Half
So-
of the historic district and half of the house.
Does it just go on placemaking? Like, people don't know where our historic district is.
We'll
So
have
would
a
that
map
just be
in
on
here.
placemaking?
You'll have a
No,
map.
but I mean like. if
Oh,
we're
I see what you're saying,
in
like,
town, like,
Again, promoting it or advertising or talking
Yeah.
about it. Yes,
like
exactly.
instead of
That's all part of that identity that's like
paving our
missing.
streets, we put bricks in the historic
Well,
park.
we have the color.
You know, like downtown.
Yeah, and
We
that-
have the
Yeah.
colored signs that are different.
Well, that's
color
true. Yeah, the
in
street signs are
historic
different
area.
colored.
Yeah, but the street signs are colored. Do people know
No,
that that's what that means?
No, not to the
kind of
cold.
thing.
I thought it said it on the sign. Doesn't it say it on the sign?
what's on?
Like on Market Street.
For Washington.
Or
Or like
Washington,
Main
yeah.
Street, they'll have
Yeah.
a different color, and I probably designated it as something.
Okay.
We can look. It's-
And we can add a note here on the physical, on the placemaking in terms of, again, so there's a cross-reference here on the historic district in terms of identification and whatever that is, if it's again signage or other detailing. And
Wouldn't it
then,
be fun to take the history of Dayton and have like a walking tour of the
I
history
love
of
that
Dayton and like
idea.
signs that identify like
Yeah.
this was at once the grocery store.
Yes, yeah.
This was
and,
the bank.
and
This-
that's a very easy like
That'd be
action
so
step. Like
cute.
develop a walking tour. You know that could be.
yeah, because
you
people
know,
want stuff to do. They want walking places. That'd be
Yeah.
so fun. I don't know where that goes on here, but
and we can maybe change, so the design regulation for historic district maybe provide, like suggest that you maybe do design guidelines. Guidelines is less restrictive than regs.
World War II bomb area.
Probably.
Rhonda's tracking me. I don't even know what you just asked.
Well, I just made a comment on number one there in terms of the design regulation, again, talking about the historic district, like guidelines instead of regulations.
Yeah.
And again, that would be suggestions in terms of, again, if you're doing your facade rehab, regulations may say it has to be a type of wood or whatever versus we would suggest it's like you follow this, like the traditional color paint, or whatever, you see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, you wouldn't necessarily,
Make them, but
here's a palette that you know.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of opposition when you start telling somebody what color to paint
Yeah.
the place or something.
that's what I'm saying, but you could
Yeah.
provide guidelines to suggest
Yeah.
that, because of course,
Yeah,
if someone
yeah.
does paint it like purple, well, then that's not really, you're now probably removing your structure from a contributing building because you modified it.
Right.
So if you have, suggestions, like this would be in support of the historic district.
Yeah.
Instead of saying you need to use brick 36A and everything, and like very strict, materials instead of this, this is
Yeah.
to give some example, like present injury, this is the
Yeah.
feel that we're going for.
All right, let's look at the last one here, number 13, hazard mitigation. So this one for us, how we structured the goal is more about kind of safety and well-being of the residents versus, like, for instance, you don't have a coal plant here in the community that we're dealing with. It's not, where some kind of, we'd be dealing with those kind of environmental, issues. So we don't have those kind of things, as an example. So for us, it was more in terms of, then let's interpret the hazard mitigation in terms of the safety of residents. So in this case, it's working with your county emergency management agency to continue to utilize and as they update their hazard mitigation plans. So they have one. I'm assuming you're familiar with it.
Yeah, they
The town
they
just
just
adopted
yeah
the
they
county's.
just
And I feel like
did
it should say like continue to work with them because
Yeah, okay.
our marshal was part of that,
Perfect. Okay.
wasn't he?
Yes,
I'm
he
pretty sure
was.
his name was, yeah.
Because the idea is like if they were to, if it gets updated, you'd want to be part of that.
Yeah, and
That's
then
what
was
that's
made as
saying.
part of it, and
Yeah.
so our marshal was like our representative.
We also have a notification system.
You
We
do.
do, yeah, you have
But
to
it's
sign up for it,
voluntary.
yeah.
Okay, so
And then you
instead
get
of,
to choose if you want a text message, a voicemail, or an email.
okay, so continue to promote and refine the notification system.
That's
How is
good.
that?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, that's what we have there for that. Is there any other outstanding thing in that kind of idea or concept that you can think of?
you don't have a biohazard in your
Right. There's
lifestyle
not
or-
something that we're not familiar with. That's like some crazy. Okay.
I hope not.
Yeah, I'm like, no. Is
Okay.
there?
I didn't find any, but
No.
that it's also maybe not something you advertise.
Right, no, I don't think so.
All right. So Sam, let's wrap up here with some next steps.
Yep. So next steps, as you say, you go home, read through this again. Think of any you missed this topic. We can explore this topic more, or like I'd like to see this kind of covered. Can we up this verbiage, make it more firm, things like that. We're also going to send it to everybody that wasn't able to come tonight. And the map will also be included in that. You can send me comments, you can email me, call me, go to my parents' house, they'll smile and nod at you and be like, yeah, sure.
So what time is Christmas dinner?
Yeah, Saturday at 4.
Weather permitting.
Yeah, weather permitting. Like, I really want to be there. So that's your first initial thing. The next steps are going to be, we're going to have a public workshop after we come back, and we're going to refine these, and also looking at the different actions that go along with it. So your next role will be to then advertise it, very similar to what you guys did for
We'll give you
the first.
promotional stuff to do.
Yeah,
that,
we'll have a promotional flyer.
And anything that you provide in terms of comments as you're reviewing independently, or what we took notes on tonight, we'll update all that, and that'll all be updated before that late January session.
So then the public workshop is presenting this.
Correct. So
Yes.
that series of public events very much would be their chance to have some response in terms of comment on the draft ideas.
Is that more
Which is what
like
this is.
this? Like you would come and there would be a presentation and not an open house where
We've
it's
done
like,
it both ways. So, I think sometimes when we ask people to prioritize things, it works better to have an exercise to do some prioritization,
Yeah.
for them to do that.
yeah,
So independently, they can give us some responses in terms of like, we agree, we disagree, or
yeah,
we ask you to prioritize, like, give me this objective list, right? Because when we go to the action items, so say I just open up housing, I have 6 things here. Give me your top 2, because again, like, you can't do everything all at once. We have
Yeah.
to begin to prioritize. It doesn't mean some of them go away, but then so that way we begin to have some this is what as a town you need to concentrate on in that first 1 to 3 year period, and so on and so forth. So sometimes I think those exercises, activities work best because we need them to kind of give us some thought in terms of like, I like this idea and this is a top priority.
yeah.
And then now, within all those book materials, they'll have different mapping. So like I kind of combined things into one map here, but like you'll have your future transportation map. So it's going to have all your sidewalks that we've identified as gaps, as well as potential roadway improvements, whether that be like repaving or we want to, not extend Yoast, but like have a widening of something, or we want to complete this kind of patch or anything like that, as well as a separate future land use, and then also a Parks and Rec. We have identified this area to be a potential park, or
somewhere in here could be a
yeah,
park or open space.
yeah, or gateway or a trail and things
Yeah.
like that. There'll be individual maps for that instead of this combined one, so people can really focus in and draw. Like, no, the trail, no, not here. Put it on this road leading this way, and things like that. And that kind of does better in the open house sense. So I can stand there and talk to somebody about this meeting while someone's talking about something over there.
So that'll be in January, or, probably towards mid to late January. And then we'll come back just kind of looking ahead here then in late winter with the steering committee within the draft kind of plan. So that would be more of the written, we'll send that out prior to that meeting, and a chance to review that. And then that goes to your OPRA review, because then they have to go through and review it and, whatnot as well. And then it'll go through your adoption and whatnot following that. So that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of kind of the winter and early spring. All right.
So exciting.
Well, that's all we have this evening. So sorry we're 20 minutes over, but appreciate the conversation. So, as I said, we'll send out an email to the group
With these materials.
with these materials and some instructions, and we'll give probably a date. We reckon it's the Christmas holidays, so like sometime maybe the first week of January, if you have some feedback,
Yeah.
additional based, not, if what we talked about, fine, if you want to reinforce that, if there's something new, that way we need a week or two to be able to put it, like,
Yeah.
all the stuff together for the public, right?
Right.
So we can incorporate those.
Right.
So we'll put a date in terms of when we're requesting, kind of maybe some comments by, so it gives us time to do that.
Okay.
All righty?
Love it.
All right, well, thank you all.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. So much fun to talk because you're so happy.
So there's more on the steering committee, right?